You hear about omega-3 everywhere. Doctors recommend it, nutritionists recommend it, fitness influencers recommend it. But when you ask, why exactly? What does it do? What will change if I start taking it? You rarely get a clear answer. It's good for the heart. It reduces inflammation. It's important for the brain. What does this mean specifically? Why the heart? What inflammation? Which part of the brain? Today, I, as a nutritionist, will explain what omega-3 fatty acids actually are, which specific physiological processes they participate in, and why their deficiency is one of the most widespread and at the same time one of the most correctable nutritional problems. Let me start by describing what omega-3 deficiency looks like in the life of a specific person and why it is so rarely recognized. Omega-3 deficiency does not have bright, obvious symptoms like, for example, iron deficiency anemia or severe vitamin B12 deficiency. It is a slow, accumulating deterioration in the quality of physiological processes that manifests as a general decrease in the quality of life, without clear attribution to a specific cause. There are several characteristic stories I hear in consultations. First story, a woman, 38 years old. For several years, she had been noticing dry skin that responds poorly to moisturizers, deterioration in the condition of her hair, joint aches after physical activity that had not been there before, and a gradual increase in background anxiety. She had been to doctors. All her tests were normal. When analyzing her diet, she ate practically no fatty fish, once a month at most, and had no omega-3 supplementation. After 3 months of supplementation, the skin became noticeably softer, the joint aches decreased, and she subjectively described the emotional background as more stable. There is an important detail about this story. The changes occurred not from one supplement, but from correcting a systemic deficiency that had accumulated over years. This is exactly why the effect of omega-3 supplementation in people with true deficiency often appears broader than expected. It affects several organ systems simultaneously. Second story, a man, 51 years old. He came with the question, "My cardiologist recommended omega-3. I read that it's fish oil. I've been eating fish my whole life. Why do I suddenly need supplements?" When analyzing his diet, he ate fish 2 to 3 times a week, mainly pangasius, pollock, and tilapia. The problem is that these are white fish species with minimal omega-3 content. The main omega-3 sources, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, anchovy, were absent from his diet. Third story, a young woman, 24 years old, a vegan for 2 years, intelligent, conscious, aware of nutritional risks of veganism. She takes B12, iron, vitamin D3, but omega-3 was not in her protocol. When analyzing, she ate flaxseed and chia seeds regularly. She thought this was enough for omega-3. When explaining the difference between ALA from plant sources and EPA and DHA from marine sources, and showing the low conversion rate of ALA to EPA and DHA in the human body, she revised her protocol and added algae-based EPA/DHA. Fourth story, a man, 45 years old, a top manager, high stress, irregular eating, frequent business trips. He knew about omega-3 but considered it a supplement for the elderly. When analyzing his inflammatory markers, CRP highly sensitive was at 3.2, the upper limit of normal, and his triglycerides were elevated. After 4 months of omega-3 supplementation at 2 grams EPA and DHA per day, CRP decreased to 0.8, triglycerides normalized. He described the change in cognitive clarity in the afternoons as significant. What do all these stories have in common? Omega-3 deficiency is silent, multisystemic, and widespread, and at the same time, one of the most easily correctable nutritional deficiencies if approached with understanding of the mechanisms. There is important statistics about omega-3 status in the population. According to data from the Global Omega-3 Index study, the omega-3 index, the content of EPA and DHA in red blood cell membranes, is below the optimal value of 8% in approximately 98% of people in Russia and most European countries. The average value in Russia is about 3 to 4%, a zone of increased cardiovascular risk according to international classification. It is precisely this near-universal deficit that makes omega-3 one of the most relevant nutrients for discussion. Now, the mechanisms. I explain as a nutritionist, precisely and to the point. Let me start with the basics. The term omega-3 unites several fatty acids, among which 3 are most important for human health. Alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, is a plant omega-3 found in flax seeds, chia, walnuts, and hemp seeds. Eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, DHA, are long-chain omega-3 fatty acids found mainly in fatty marine fish and seafood. The key distinction: ALA can be partially converted in the body to EPA and then to DHA, but this conversion is extremely inefficient. Only about 5 to 15% of ALA becomes EPA, and less than 1% becomes DHA. This is why plant sources of omega-3, however important they are as part of a balanced diet, cannot fully replace marine sources for most people. First mechanism: EPA, DHA, and cell membrane composition. EPA and DHA are structural components of phospholipids, the main building material of cell membranes. The membranes of every cell in the body, neurons, cardiomyocytes, immunocytes, epithelial cells, contain EPA and DHA in their composition. The higher the content of these fatty acids in the membrane, the more fluid, flexible, and functionally active the membrane is. There is an important detail about membrane fluidity. Membrane fluidity affects the speed and efficiency of signaling between cells. Receptors for hormones and neurotransmitters embedded in the membrane work better when the membrane is sufficiently fluid. This is why omega-3 deficiency affects virtually all organ systems simultaneously. It reduces the functional efficiency of the membranes of all cells. Second mechanism: EPA and the anti-inflammatory cascade. In cell membranes, EPA and DHA compete with arachidonic acid, an omega-6 fatty acid, for cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase enzymes. Arachidonic acid, through these enzymes, produces pro-inflammatory prostaglandins and leukotrienes. EPA also produces prostaglandins and leukotrienes, but different ones, significantly less potent or with opposite anti-inflammatory properties. Additionally, EPA and DHA are precursors of resolvins, protectins, and marazins, specialized pro-resolving mediators. It is precisely these molecules that actively complete inflammatory reactions and restore tissue homeostasis after inflammation. They literally resolve inflammation. Without sufficient EPA and DHA, inflammatory reactions are initiated normally but completed less efficiently, which creates the basis for chronic low-grade inflammation. Third mechanism: DHA and the brain. DHA makes up approximately 30 to 40% of all fatty acids in the brain and up to 60% in the photoreceptors of the retina. It is structurally irreplaceable. Unlike other fatty acids, DHA cannot be substituted by other molecules in neuronal membranes. This is why DHA is critical for the development of the fetal brain during pregnancy, and why its deficiency in adults is associated with a deterioration in cognitive function and an increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases. There is an important detail about the DHA-dopamine connection. DHA is necessary for the normal expression of dopamine receptors in the prefrontal cortex. With DHA deficiency, the density of dopamine receptors decreases, which manifests as reduced motivation, difficulty concentrating, and a general decrease in the drive. This is one of the mechanisms through which omega-3 supplementation improves cognitive function and mood in people with deficiency. Fourth mechanism, omega-3 and triglycerides. High-dose EPA and DHA, above 2 to 4 grams per day, reliably reduce triglyceride levels in the blood by 20 to 30%. The mechanism: EPA and DHA reduce the production of VLDL, very low-density lipoproteins, in the liver, through which the liver secretes triglycerides into the blood. Additionally, they increase the activity of lipoprotein lipase, the enzyme that clears triglycerides from the blood. This triglyceride-lowering effect is so reliable and significant that it is included in cardiovascular risk reduction protocols in many countries. In the REDUCE-IT study, a purified EPA preparation at 4 grams per day reduced the risk of major cardiovascular events by 25% in patients with elevated triglycerides already receiving statins. Fifth mechanism, omega-3 and inflammatory markers. Regular EPA and DHA intake at doses of 1 to 4 grams per day reliably reduces blood levels of highly sensitive CRP, C-reactive protein, which is a marker of systemic inflammation and an independent cardiovascular risk factor. The meta-analytic data on this is consistent. The higher the initial CRP, the more pronounced the effect of omega-3 supplementation. There is an important nuance about omega-3 and immunity. Omega-3 does not suppress immunity, it modulates it. The difference is fundamental. Immunosuppression means reduced ability to fight infections. Immunomodulation through omega-3 means reducing excessive inflammatory reactions while preserving the normal immune response to real threats. This is particularly important for people with chronic inflammatory conditions, autoimmune diseases, inflammatory bowel disease, chronic joint inflammation. Sixth mechanism, omega-3, insulin sensitivity and metabolism. EPA and DHA improve insulin sensitivity through several mechanisms. They enhance the fluidity of the cell membrane, which improves the efficiency of insulin receptor signaling. They activate PPAR-alpha and PPAR-gamma receptors that regulate glucose and fat metabolism, and they reduce the inflammatory background that is directly associated with insulin resistance. A meta-analysis of clinical studies showed omega-3 supplementation reliably improves insulin sensitivity in people with metabolic syndrome and prediabetes. Additionally, EPA and DHA reduce fat accumulation in liver cells, hepatic steatosis, which is a frequent consequence of insulin resistance and the main modifiable risk factor for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now about mistakes, the most common ones with omega-3. Mistake 1. Confusing plant and marine omega-3. ALA from flax seeds and chia seeds is an important fatty acid, but its conversion to EPA and DHA in the human body is minimal and unreliable. This is why saying, "I get omega-3 from flaxseed" is true, but doesn't solve the EPA and DHA problem. For vegans and vegetarians, the solution is algae omega-3, the same algae that fish eat and from which they accumulate EPA and DHA. This is a direct way to get marine long-chain omega-3 without consuming animal products. Mistake 2. Taking omega-3 without fat-containing food. EPA and DHA are fat-soluble compounds. Their absorption from the intestine requires the presence of bile, which is secreted in response to fat in food. Taking omega-3 on an empty stomach or with a fat-free meal reduces absorption by 30 to 50%. Always take omega-3 with a meal that contains fat. Mistake 3. Choosing a product with insufficient EPA and DHA content. On the label, it may be written 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, but the actual content of EPA and DHA may be only 300 milligrams. The rest is other fats and auxiliary components. It is precisely EPA and DHA content, not total fish oil content, that is what you need to look at on the label. The clinically significant daily dose for preventive purposes is at least 1 gram of EPA and DHA combined. For therapeutic purposes, 2 to 4 grams. There is an important detail about checking product quality. Quality fish oil should be tested for heavy metals, mercury, lead, cadmium, and for oxidation, peroxide value. Quality producers publish the results of third-party testing. IFOS, International Fish Oil Standards, certification means the product has passed such testing. This is worth paying attention to when choosing. Mistake 4. Expecting immediate results. EPA and DHA are incorporated into cell membranes gradually. Complete renewal of the membrane composition takes about 4 to 6 weeks of regular intake. This is why evaluating the effectiveness of omega-3 supplementation earlier than 2 to 3 months of regular intake does not make sense. The same applies to assessing the change in the omega-3 index, a blood test showing EPA and DHA content in red blood cell membranes. It is reassessed no earlier than 3 months after the start of supplementation. Mistake 5. Not accounting for the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. In the modern Western diet, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is approximately 15 to 20 to 1, while the evolutionarily optimal ratio is approximately 2 to 4 to 1. Excess omega-6, primarily from refined vegetable oils, sunflower, corn, soybean, competes with EPA and DHA for the same enzymes and reduces the anti-inflammatory effect of omega-3. This is why reducing the consumption of omega-6-rich refined oils is as important as increasing omega-3. Both actions together change the balance significantly faster than supplementation alone. Mistake 6. Storing omega-3 incorrectly. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are extremely unstable. They are easily oxidized upon contact with air, light, and heat. Oxidized omega-3 is not only ineffective, but can be harmful. Oxidized fats increase oxidative stress. Quality omega-3 preparations should be stored in the refrigerator, protected from light. The capsule form protects the contents from oxidation better than liquid fish oil in a bottle. If fish oil in liquid form is used, it must be kept strictly refrigerated and consumed within 4 to 6 weeks after opening. Now, what really works for correcting omega-3 deficiency? First, identify the main sources of EPA and DHA in your diet. How often do you eat fatty marine fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, anchovy? If less than 2 to 3 times a week, you almost certainly have an EPA and DHA deficit regardless of how much flaxseed you add to your porridge. This is the starting point of dietary assessment. Second, add omega-3 supplementation. The form and dosage depend on the goals. For general prevention in healthy people, approximately 1 gram of EPA and DHA per day. For inflammatory conditions, elevated triglycerides, or a documented low omega-3 index, 2 to 4 grams per day, ideally under the supervision of a nutritionist or physician. Third, increase the consumption of fatty marine fish. 2 to 3 servings of fatty marine fish per week provide approximately 1 to 2 grams of EPA and DHA. This is an adequate baseline for most people. The preferred preparation methods are lightly salted, baked, or steamed. These better preserve the polyunsaturated fatty acids compared to frying in oil at high temperatures. Fourth, measure the omega-3 index. The omega-3 index is a blood test that shows the content of EPA and DHA in red blood cell membranes. The optimal range is 8 to 11%. A range of 4 to 8% is a zone of moderate risk. Below 4% is high cardiovascular risk. This test allows objectively assessing the status of these fatty acids and monitoring the effectiveness of correction. Fifth, reduce the consumption of refined omega-6 oils. Replacing sunflower and corn oils with olive oil and avocado oil in cooking with the use of coconut oil for high-temperature frying reduces the omega-6 load without sacrificing the quality of food preparation. This change, combined with omega-3 supplementation, rebalances the ratio more efficiently than supplementation alone. Sixth, for vegans and vegetarians, algae omega-3. Algae-based EPA and DHA provide the same long-chain fatty acids as fish oil without any compromise for dietary principles. Dosage, the same as for conventional omega-3, starting from 1 gram of EPA and DHA per day for prevention. Now, about the specific product, omega-3 with high EPA and DHA content. When choosing an omega-3 supplement, the key criteria are the actual content of EPA and DHA per capsule, the form of the fatty acids, the presence of third-party testing, and the storage conditions. About the forms of omega-3. Fish oil is available in two main molecular forms, triglyceride and ethyl ester. Triglyceride form, the natural form in which omega-3 is found in fish. It has higher bioavailability. Studies show 30 to 50% higher absorption compared to ethyl ester, especially when taken without fat-containing food. Ethyl ester form, a more common and cheaper form of pharmaceutical-grade omega-3. It is effective with the mandatory simultaneous intake of fat-containing food. About the choice between EPA and DHA for specific goals. EPA has a more pronounced anti-inflammatory effect and is a priority for working with inflammatory conditions, mood, and triglycerides. DHA is a priority for brain health, visual function, and pregnancy. A combined product with both EPA and DHA is the most universal choice for prevention and general health support. About dosage. For general prevention, 500 milligrams to 1 gram of EPA and DHA per day. For elevated triglycerides and elevated CRP, 2 to 4 grams per day. For neurocognitive purposes, specifically for DHA, at least 1 gram of DHA per day. These doses are based on clinical data and are the standard for the respective indications. How to take it? Always with a fat-containing meal. Once or twice daily, depending on dosage. Store in the refrigerator. Check the expiration date. Oxidized omega-3 has a rancid smell that is noticeable when the capsule is broken. The link to omega-3 in the description of this video. Omega-3 is not a trend, and not another supplement invented by the supplement industry. This is one of the fundamental nutrients that the human body is adapted to receive from food, and that the modern diet provides in critically insufficient quantities. 3 concrete steps. Honestly assess how often you eat fatty marine fish. If less than twice a week, add omega-3 supplementation at a dose of at least 1 gram of EPA and DHA per day. Take with a fat-containing meal, always. Omega-3 cannot be replaced by a slogan, but it can be replaced by knowledge and action. There is a final thought about omega-3 in the context of a complete nutritional approach. Omega-3 works best not as an isolated supplement, but as part of a nutritional pattern that is already moving in the direction of whole foods, reduced ultra-processed consumption, and sufficient proteins and fiber. In an optimal context, omega-3 closes the physiological gap that diet alone, even with the best intentions, cannot close for most people. There is a final word about long-term use. Unlike many nutrients, which are taken in courses, EPA and DHA can and should be taken continuously because their natural source, fatty marine fish, is a regular component of a healthy diet, and supplementation simply replaces its insufficient consumption. There is no research showing harm from long-term continuous intake of EPA and DHA at preventive doses. There is research showing significant benefit with long-term use, both cardiovascular and neurocognitive. If this video was helpful, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Questions about omega-3 and nutrition, write in the comments. I read and respond. See you in the next video.